Good day to all respected lecturers and fellow coursemates. First of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to present my project risk management plan. So, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Vanishri Balakrishnan and I am currently pursuing a Master of Project Management at Open University Malaysia, OUM Banjul Center. So this presentation is prepared as part of the course EMRM5103 Project Risk Management. So my matrix number is CGS 057690017. So for this assignment, I have taken on the role of a risk management consultant from Greening Environment, Padi, where I was appointed by Padi to develop and present a comprehensive risk management plan for the proposed Chilli Padi cultivation project. So now, as a risk management consultant, my responsibility is to identify potential project risks, assess their likelihood and impact, recommend practical contingency plan, and establish an effective monitoring strategy to improve the overall success of the project. So throughout this presentation, I will guide you through the complete risk management process that I have adopted. So beginning with the risk management approach, followed by the risk identification, risk assessment, risk prioritization, contingency planning, and finally the risk monitoring framework and overall conclusion. So now, my objective today is to demonstrate how a structured and proactive risk management approach can help Padi minimize uncertainty, protect their project objectives, and improve the likelihood of delivering a successful and sustainable agriculture project. So with that, let's begin by looking at the project risk management approach adopted for this project. Now that we have a better understanding of the project, let's look at the approach used to develop the risk management plan. So, rather than jumping directly into the risk, I followed a structured process consisting of 5 key stages. So, the first stage is risk identification. This is where potential threats and uncertainties were identified by reviewing the project scenario and understanding the project's objectives and operating environment. So once the risks were identified, the next stage was risk assessment. So at this stage, each risk was evaluated based on its probability of occurring and its potential impact on the project. So, however, not every risk requires the same level of attention. So this leads us to the third stage, which is risk prioritization. The purpose here is to determine which risk pose the greatest threat and therefore required immediate management focus. After prioritizing the risk, the fourth stage involved developing contingency plans. These are practical actions that can either prevent the risk from occurring or minimize its impact if it does occur. Finally, the risk monitoring was established to ensure that risks continue to be tracked throughout the project lifecycle. What I like about this approach is that it focuses on prevention rather than reaction. Instead of waiting for problems to happen, we prepare them in advance. Now that we have looked at the methodology, now let's move on to the risk that we have identified during the assessment process. At this stage, the objective was to identify all possible risks that could affect project success. To ensure that no important risk was overlooked, I grouped the risk into 9 categories. So these include scope, schedule, technical, quality, human resource, supply material, health and safety, natural disaster, and environmental risk. So, you might notice that some of these categories are directly related to farming activities, while others are related to project management and operational performance. This is actually intentional. So, a successful project depends on much more than just crop cultivation. For example, even if the crops are healthy, a labor shortage during the harvesting can still affect the project outcomes. So similarly, delays in fertilizer supply can impact crop growth and productivity. After analyzing the project information, a total 15 risks were identified and recorded in the risk register. At this point, the challenge was no longer identifying risk. The challenge was determining which risk deserved the highest level of attention. So the logical step was to access and rank these risks systematically. Now, let's move on to the risk assessment matrix. Now that all risks have been identified, the next question becomes, which risks are the most dangerous to the project? Yes. So, to answer this question, I conducted a probability and impact assessment. Each risk was assessed based on two criteria. First, how likely is the risk to occur? Second, if it occurs, how severe would the consequences be? So, these scores were then multiplied to produce an overall risk scores. The results are displayed in the risk assessment matrix shown on this particular slide. So now, as we move towards the upper right corner of the matrix, the risks become increasingly serious because both probability and impact are high. So, after reviewing the matrix, three risks immediately stood out. Yes, flooding due to poor drainage. Yeah. Next is unsuitability, soil fertility, and pH level. The third one is pest infestation or crop disease outbreaks. Now, these risks consistently scored higher than the other because they directly affect crop survival, harvest yield, quality standards, and project profitability. This assessment helped transform a long list of risks into a focused list of management priorities. So next, let's take a closer look at these three critical risks. Now this slide is about top 3 priority lists. So based on the assessment risk results, 3 risks were selected as the highest priorities. The first and the most critical risk is flooding due to poor drainage. The risk received the highest score is 25, which makes this risk particularly concerning is that the project scenario already indicates drainage challenges at risk. So, on the other words, this is not a hypothetical issue. It is an existing condition that could become a major problem if left unmanaged. The second priority risk is unsuitable soil fertility and pH level. Healthy soil is the foundation of a successful cultivation. If soil conditions are not suitable, crop growth will be affected regardless of how much effort is invested in the other areas. So the third priority risk is pest infestation and crop disease outbreaks. Agricultural projects are highly vulnerable to biological threats because pests can spread quickly and affect larger area within a short period. What these 3 risks have in common is that they all directly influence production output, crop quality, project schedules, and financial performance. Because of their strategic importance, these risks become the primary focus of the contingency planning process. So now, let's look into the actions proposed to manage these risks. Now that we have identified the most critical risks, the next step is determining how they should be managed. flooding, the recommended strategy is risk reduction. So this includes improving drainage system, creating raised planting beds, and preparing emergency pumping equipment during periods of rain and heavy rain. So for unsuitable soil condition, risk avoidance was selected. This means addressing the problem before cultivation begins through soil testing, pH correction, and soil enhancement programs. So for pest infestation, a combination of risk reduction and risk sharing is recommended. This involves implementing integrated pest management practices while working closely with agricultural specialists and technical experts. However, contingency planning alone is not enough. Even the best plans are ineffective if risks are not continuously monitored. For this reason, a monitoring framework was also developed. The framework tracks key triggers such as abnormal rainfall, signs of pest activity, delayed farming inputs, irrigation failures, and labor shortages. So once these warning signs are detected, the relevant stakeholders can be informed immediately, allowing correction actions to be implemented before serious disruption occur. This proactive approach significantly increases the project's resilience and ability to adapt to changing any condition. Right, and that brings us to the final part of the presentation. As a conclusion, the Chilli Padi cultivation project presents a valuable opportunity to support agricultural development and improve local production capacity. So, however, like any project, success is not guaranteed. Success depends on how effectively risks are managed throughout the project lifecycle. Through this assessment, 15 risks were identified, assessed, and prioritized. Among them, flooding, unsuitable soil condition, and pest infestation emerged as the most significant threats. Appropriate contingency measures and monitoring strategy were then developed to address these risks proactively. In my professional assessment, the project remains achievable within the proposed budget and timeline, provided that the recommended risk management practices are implemented consistently. By anticipating risk early, monitoring key triggers, and responding promptly when issues arise, Padi can significantly improve its ability to achieve project objective, maintain quality standards, minimize disruptions, and protect overall project profitability. Thank you very much for your time and attention. This concludes